Hey, are you an entrepreneur on your path of building your first or next six-figure business? Do you have a community of people with success and the direction that you want to go to hold you accountable and develop you to be the best entrepreneur you can be? Well, if you don't have consistent development or community, I'd like to invite you. This is one of the main reasons 90% of entrepreneurs fail at business. They don't have consistent development or community. Entrepreneur Zero to 100 is the place for those specifically on their path of creating a six-figure service-based business. And inside Entrepreneur Zero to 100, we cover things like building the perfect offer to have clients rolling through the doors, money mindset so you know how not to fumble the bag once you get it, systems and hiring virtual assistants to automate your business, sales and building your own sales teams, social media and creating content that sells, weekly group coaching calls. You even get a one-on-one call with myself once per month to ask any questions and peel back the layers in your business. And too much to cover here. If you're interested in joining, it is only $1 to join for a limited time using our $1 promo code. This will give you access to our weekly live group coaching calls where you can get your questions answered, and you also get to meet and connect with other entrepreneurs on the inside. To take advantage of this offer, send me a DM on Instagram at _Justin Carter, or you can visit our website at www.pivotbizz.com/EZ100 for more information. Link is also found in the show notes. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Pivot Mindset Podcast. My name is Justin. I am your host. And man, let's get into this episode. So before we do so, I just want to knock out some quick housekeeping. If you haven't already, if this is your first time listening to this podcast, we are building a community, and we here believe that life is all about the pivots, and those who decide to make the pivots decide to become successful. That success is a deliberate decision that you make each and every day based on your ability to make the pivots that life requires of us. And so that's our mission. That's what we're focused on, helping people, whether it's entrepreneurs or just people that are working 9 to 5s, whether it's single moms, whether it's, whoever you are. I think everybody has pivots in their lives that life requires them to make. And so that's our mission. That's why we're doing this thing here. And as always, if you are returning, or if you're getting value from any of the information that's coming here, feel free, share this with your friends, share this with your family, and give this podcast a rating, a review. We really appreciate it. It really helps keep this podcast going and help to keep the message out. Well, so I'm really excited. You guys know that a couple episodes I talked about bringing guests back on into our world. The desire is that you guys just don't hear from me, but we also have guests on. And of course, guys, you know that we're going to be talking about the pivots. So, I want to kind of get you guys connected, and I'm going to introduce you guys to our guest. But before I do so, what I also recommend is that if you guys have found clips of this, or if there's parts of this podcast that you would like to clip and share it on social media too. And I could be tagged on @_Justin Carter. So without further ado, if you're watching on YouTube, I want to introduce our guest, Jasson. Jasson, welcome to the podcast, my man.
Thanks, man. Happy to be here, man.
Absolutely, bro. So glad to have you, man. So let's dive into this. So many of my audience, they may not know you. They may not know, like, who is this guy? Who is he coming from? What is he all about? So, man, before we dive in, let's just talk about a little bit about yourself, man. Give us an introduction, who you are, where you're from, before we dive in.
All right. So my name is Jasson Martin. I currently reside in Denver, Colorado. Grew up in California, though, but I reside in Denver, Colorado, and I am a full-time musician, and videographer, video editor, and pastor too. I've been ordained, but yeah, I do music, I do video, and yeah, that's
100%.
pretty much me in a nutshell.
Hey, well, welcome to the podcast, man. Welcome to the Pivot Mindset Podcast. So let's dive right in, man. So I want to kind of talk a little bit about your story, because I think by our story and who we are and what we represent, that is what we can use and what we should be using to help other people really make life's pivots and go throughout the journey of life. So Man, like how, let's kind of talk about some of the upbringing, right? So when you talk about kind of your story and where you're at now, you kind of name some of the accolades, some of the things that you've accomplished. Bring us back to like young Jasson. Like when you were growing up, man, like what was the environment that you grew up in? What did you see? How were people around you? Did you see people flourishing? Did you see people struggling? Like what was your upbringing like?
So, one, I'm a PK, so my dad's a pastor. I'm number two of six children. So I
Okay.
had a brother that was older than me, then it was me, and then they're twins right under me, then my baby brother, and then my baby sister. She's the youngest and the only girl. My dad's a pastor. My dad was also in the military. So he retired Army.
Mm.
And so we moved around a lot. So I was actually born in Colorado Springs. And then probably around two or three, we moved to Germany. Was in Germany for a little bit, and then we moved to Hawaii, and then we moved to California. So I was
Wow.
in first grade when we moved to California. So I did most of my schooling there, came back to Colorado when my grandfather got sick, my mom's father, and who was also retired military and also a pastor.
Wow.
And so I finished high school in Colorado Springs. I graduated there and then went back to California for college. So kind of all over. So um, I was never stationary enough per se because of military to, like grow up. Like I know I have friends that, have kids and friends till this day that they grew up with, from kids on. I don't have that. Not even with family. I didn't
Wow.
grow up around cousins that we were 5 and 6 and grew up together just because of the nature of the military. But so I've always, in what I do, I never really had the example of people around me that did it full time. I just grew up very old school. You're going to go to college, you're going to get a career, and you're going to work
Mhm.
and eventually retire, or you do the military. So when I was growing up, it was never the big thing. Now is a lot of kids go to Berkeley School of Music and do all of that stuff, and people were doing that then. Like it was around. I'm not that old, but it wasn't a thing that was immediately encouraged like it is now. You see all of these kids doing this and doing music full time. So, I took the career route of going to school and for computer engineering, and I was going to do that whole thing. And then, yeah, God just ended up having other plans.
Yeah. So why before we, because I know you do a lot of this stuff around music now, and obviously you're been involved and are involved in the church. But what, like, why didn't you decide to go into the military? You got a huge background of people that are in the military, but also did pastoring and things like that. Why didn't you go that path?
Uh, JROTC ruined me.
Really?
So I did JROTC in high school,
Okay.
and I had, you're in this class with people that are your age, and there was just people in there that were on power trips, and I was like, yeah, if this is what the military is, I'm not doing it. I don't do well. You yelling and all of that. Like I'm just not good with that.
Yeah.
So, and
Hey.
it's not that I'm like defiant because I played football, and you played football. So them coaches is going they gonna get you.
100%.
So it wasn't that. It wasn't I didn't understand structure. Again, I grew up in a military home. It was just like I was like, nah, this ain't. I already knew from doing JROTC. I was like, that wasn't it.
It's like this ain't
I
it.
mean, and they tried to get me to go to like the Air Force Academy,
Okay.
and I was like,
So what was
"Mm."
that's interesting. So because when I was in high school and just seeing people, because I never knew outside of people walking around with what looked to be military uniforms on. I didn't know really outside of anything else like what they did, right? And I could
Mhm.
imagine, right, that 15, 16, 17-year-old that becomes this power trip of like and here's the other thing. I'm sure that people in JROTC have nothing to do with people that are in the military, and like they're not in the military first of all. So
Right.
it's interesting, but so that kind of persuaded you not to go that route. So for you, obviously you were kind of going against the grain, right? You didn't do the normal, college thing. You didn't go that normal path. You didn't do the normal, go to the military like your family and the people that come from where you come from did. So like, how were you kind of looked at growing up? Like, what was your like? Were you ever considered like, hey, this guy isn't gonna make it? Like, how did people like? Where did you fit in? Was it music that you just started to land into? Like, how did you fit in?
Uh, I don't even know if it was I fit in musically. I kind of did. My whole family was musical, so growing up in California, like me and my brothers had a group, and we would go all over the churches all over California singing.
Okay.
And so we were doing that thing. I was playing drums or whatever. But I think with me, like my brother right under me, Terrell, everyone looked at him as like, this is going to be the music guy, and things like that. With me, it was just everybody was like, "You're gonna preach. You're gonna be a pastor." Like my grandparents,
That's funny.
everybody,
That's
and I
funny.
was like, "No, I'm not. I don't want to do that. I
You
want to
wouldn't
play."
embrace it. You wouldn't lean into it. Hey,
Nah,
it's funny because, so just backstory. So Jason and man, I met Jason when I lived in Denver. Jason was the MD at a church that we both went to, and yo, Jason. so so there's no MD like Jason, at least in my experience. So, man, Jason would get the mic, and I don't even know if this is what you're supposed to be doing, right? But Jason at church, would maybe raise an offering, or Jason, hey, Jason, start us with prayer, and y'all, Jason is a preacher. He been running from it, I think probably all his life, but Jason is a preacher. Jason always got a word in him. Man, he's man of wisdom, but a man who could truly break down text, eisegete the text. Like it's crazy that he that you would run and that you had been running from this gift. So now I hear you said you were ordained, so you're ordained minister at the church that you're at right now.
nah. I was ordained out. So I was ordained by a bishop like some years ago
Okay,
as a pastor. I never really told anybody because I was just like, whatever.
this dude
Then at our church
never
that we
really
went
told anybody.
to, they came to me and was like, "You should get ordained." I was like, "Well, I already am," and they were like, "What?" So I got ordained by the last pastor that was there as a pastor.
Okay,
And so I haven't been here, like where I'm at now. Like, I don't, they know, but they don't know, right?
this
It's
dude.
crazy because
Why? So all right. So we got to
they,
get into this. Like, why is this gift one that you're not leaning into? Like, why aren't you leaning
well,
into? You've been ordained. Everybody keep asking,
yeah,
like, yo, when are you? What's going on?
right.
Like, why aren't you leaning into this
Well,
gift?
I think it's not that I'm not leaning into it. I think for me, it's not. I don't see it in the traditional sense. So I know a bunch of people that chase the pulpit, right? They want to be preachers and they want to do all of it. And I've seen a lot of people like just trash it, just fall. Not from the sense that they weren't good, but their characters were not.
Mm,
And I've always felt like God, I don't want to chase it like that. And I don't want to disappoint him. And for me, I just felt like some of the greatest sermons I've ever preached have been on a phone, talking
mm,
to people.
that's good.
And I would rather have an impact than to have influence.
Okay.
And I know that's weird. People probably be like, well, what do you mean? Like, can you have an impact without having influence? I believe so. But I think like I think if you have a major impact on someone, you automatically have influence. What I think is the issue is more people want influence and they
Without
could
the
care
impact.
less about making an impact.
That's
Because
true.
influence,
That's true.
influence, I feel like, and I'm just off the cuff right now, I feel like influence benefits you more than it does who you're influencing. Impact benefits them first. And then the influence comes, which then can be a benefit to you.
Yeah.
And so I would rather have an impact. And for me, I feel like part of my calling is maybe the people that either don't go to church or have and just been jaded. And their impact with me might not ever be in a church, but
Mm,
because I can speak into them, then is so I guess I'm not necessarily running from it in the holistic sense of it.
yeah.
I'm running from how people think that perceive that it should happen. So people think that I should start a church and have a church. And I'm not against that, but I'm just not a traditionalist in that regard. Like I feel it's weird. Like I feel like God is doing something different. And I grew up Kojic. I grew up in the Church of God in Christ. Like
Yeah.
that's traditional
Right.
church, and I'm not against that. I don't bash them. Like I'm grateful for my upbringing in church, nor do I bash church, nor would I ever say that don't go to church. Go to church. You should
Right.
definitely have a church and a local church or whatever. I just feel like my net is different.
Mm. Talk more about that. So, like for you, what is different about you and what you feel versus what you've seen traditionally happen? Because I agree with that. I think that so often, we can try our best to blend in, and it's like the gift and what God has given us. We can look at that gift like it's on a shelf, and that we can only pick what's on the shelf. When really, what God has given us is custom, right? It's specific to us, and often, I think sometimes people they give up something better for something that's visible. Like me, and when I say that, I mean they give up their true like the true purpose and the call that's on their lives and what God had gave them for what's easily more attainable and what's easily describable, right? For you, for
Mhm.
example, right? I'm going to give up what I really feel called to do because it's easier to be a pastor, or it's easy to be a author, or it's easy to be an entrepreneur, right? Instead of like being okay with being in your own lane in a space of unfamiliarity. So for you, like how do you feel different? Like how do you feel? Hey, here's where people have, and this is the thing, right? I think most people they are trying to put you in a box. It's just almost human psychology, right? They always want to like, oh, that's my friend Jason. He is the X, right? Whatever the thing is, or that's my friend Justin. He is right. So we try to put people in boxes. I think for the sake of simplicity and organizing people in our minds, but I think sometimes we underestimate those boxes and those boundaries and how sometimes those can become prisons for people. And so for
Right.
you, what made you decide, or not made you, but for you, like what you thought people or what people think that you should be versus the path and what you're doing and how it differs.
I think the funny thing is, I think people box you in, or at least my experience will box me in based upon their initial introduction to me. So if you
That's
meet
good.
me musically as a drummer, then everybody only thinks like, oh, that's Jason, the
The
drummer.
drummer. Yeah.
He's a drummer. And that pretty much happens to me all the time. Most people don't meet me in the church space, or even if they do, I was playing drums. So most people didn't meet me in like the minister role or had conversations with me concerning Bible or Jesus. So they know me strictly from music. And so I'm always boxed in to that. What I think the difference is that that's not who I am. That's what I
Mm,
do.
yeah.
And I think even with preaching or pastoring, that's not who you are. It's what God called you to do. Who you are is something different. And so
Yeah.
what they're trying to do is box you in to what you do, and they
Yeah.
have no idea who you are. That's fine. You can
That's
box
good.
me into that, but I'm very clear of my identity. And so what ends up happening, I'm boxed in as he's this quiet dude that just comes in and plays drums. And then somebody randomly is like, "Hey, can you pray for us before we go in?" And then I pray, and everybody's eyes are like, "Oh my God." Like, I never forget, I know you'll
That's
remember
funny.
this. Brian was live on IG. And if you're watching this, what up, B? He was live on IG, and I went on, and me and him were talking back and forth. You were in the comments. It was like, yo, this dude is a drummer. You just kept saying that. And I was dying laughing because that's a lot of people's reaction.
100%.
And I
That's so
get it.
good.
So, what they box me into compared to what I feel like I'm called to do, this is what I believe. I believe that I'm called to be a part of restoring the house of David. And the reason why people are always shocked is because, let's be honest, most of your interaction with musicians is not that. They don't really care about the things of God. They're either all they care about is their fresh J's, their fresh fit, and girls,
Hmm.
and it's all about clout and status. I want to be on this next gig so I can say I did this. And then, all of the chicks come after the musicians or whatever. So it's been that. That's the image,
Yeah.
honestly, of musicians, even in church. And so when people see that here I am, I'm not doing that. And I really am mindful of the things of God and how I represent him in the kingdom, I think they're shocked about that part
Right.
probably
Right.
more than anything. Like, oh, so it's not just drums with you, or it's not just music. Like this dude has substance,
Yeah.
and I sit to have a conversation with you, and it be of substance, and
100%.
and
That's dope.
so that's kind of what I feel for me is the difference.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So, man, this is so good. I think that where a lot of people can find maybe some intersection in what you're describing and where they are, right? Is I think many of us we try to go around or when it comes to purpose, right? And when it comes to defining purpose, often purpose is defined for many people based on how people describe them, based on how people can, put a title of them or label them something. And if we're not careful, right, you can build your purpose in that. Like if you're not careful, you can, all right, well, I just am the drummer and I only do drummer things, right? We just had a session within Entrepreneur Zero to 100, which is our group coaching community. And in that, we're talking about personal branding and building your personal brand. And what I believe is so challenging for people to realize is that they already have a personal brand. They already have one, whether they've been intentionally building it or not. It's already exist. And often their personal brand can be described based on who do people say that they are, right? If you describe a person, who do you say this person is? And so
Bro.
you in your mind can think that you have one brand, but everybody around you says you have something else. And so where personal branding starts is the ability to transition the people's minds around you. That's why it's so hard. And people think like, oh, I can just do my thing in a vacuum, or I'm gonna just do my thing behind the scenes and let nobody know. Well, if you desire people support and if you need humans to support the thing, then you're gonna have to change somebody's brand before they trust you to do that thing, right? You're gonna have to rebrand yourself, right, and change how somebody has historically thought and defined you. And I think rebranding, right, and we talk about in the pivot. This is the whole concept of the pivot. I think rebranding is one of the hardest things to do for people, especially in this day and age when everything is posted on social media. You can go all in on one thing. I for a season was the real estate guy. I for a season was the guy that was synonymous with, hey, this dude flips houses, he's got rental properties, XYZ. And my ability to rebrand, I think, wasn't as hard because it was kind of still in the entrepreneurial space. But if I
Mhm.
wanted to jump from, hey, this is the real estate guy, to jump into, hey, this is the pilot, and he does private excursions and buy his course to learn how to be a pilot. People are
Yeah.
like, wait, what? This is the real estate dude, right? And so talk to us about what it takes to like what you've done and maybe some of the challenges you've maybe had around it. But when it comes to all the gifts that you have and fully exercising all those gifts, what kind of challenges come with truly exercising the diversity of who Jasson is?
Um. Well, first off, it got so many things based off of what you said, and I'm really trying to not be this guy right now, but I can't help it. So first off, let me say this. I think the challenge is not what other people think about you or how other people label you. The challenge is what you choose to accept
Mm,
and what you think of yourself. And so the moment you take on what they think of you, then it's not a matter of publicly rebranding yourself. It's a matter of mentally rebranding yourself because I cannot push out an identity of myself that I don't even know. And so what you have is a bunch of people running around and having identity crisis. I always said if I ever did this, I would preach a message on spiritual identity crisis. It's a whole nother subject. But let me go here though. And this as you were talking, Jesus says to his disciples, "Who do men say that I am?" They begin to give answers based off of what the general public says he
100%.
is.
Yep.
He then asks, "But who do you say that I am?" So here comes Peter. "Well, you're the son of the living God." Like, he gives his thing. He says, "Flesh and blood has not revealed that to you." Not only that, but the revelation of who you have of who I am, I will build my church on it. Now,
Right.
here's what's crazy. He wanted to know. Jesus was not unclear about who he was, but he wanted to know what people thought of him so he knew how to handle it. So then fast forward, he tells Moses, and I think this is what we got to do. He says, "Tell them that I am sent you."
Mm-hmm.
He didn't even label himself, because I know y'all
Mm.
think that I'm all of these things. And at any given time, you're gonna one might need me to be a healer, one
Right.
might need me to be a mind regulator, one might need me to be a lawyer in a courtroom. So
Wow.
just say that I am. That way it leaves your mind open. And I think we have to figure out how to tell society or people around us that I am. So I'm
Yeah.
not just a
That's so
drummer.
good.
I'm not just a preacher or a pastor or a videographer. I am. I'm Jason.
Yeah.
And Jason is a multitude of things that, or Justin is a multitude of things. Justin can still go flip houses if he wants. Even if he's not doing that anymore, he still has the wisdom and the knowledge and the know how to do that. So just because you pivoted to something else doesn't mean that's not there. I was at the V2 conference at Transformation, and Tim Ross preached. And it's funny because he was kind of on this thing, and he was talking about the boat and how they walked out on the water. And he says that he was having a conversation, and Jesus, God was like, "Hey," and he was like, "Yeah." He said, "Over here." And he was in California, which is where he grew up.
Okay.
God told him to move to Dallas. And so he moved to Dallas, and he was talking about, so when they caught the fish, when they cast the net on the other side and caught the fish, took the fish back to the house, and he says to his father, he's like, "Yo, we caught the most fish we can ever catch ever
Right.
in the
Right.
history. Here you go. I could either choose to stay with the fish with you, or I
Yeah.
can go with the person that showed us how to catch. I think I'm gonna go with him." And so they said so Tim Ross explains that he's walking through town, and people are like, "Hey, aren't you the fisherman?" And he looks at them, "I was," and kept moving. And,
Wow. Wow.
and I think that's how, when you talk about pivoting, I
Yeah.
think that's how we have to be when we
That's
hear
so
the
good.
call, like, "Hey, Justin, you were flipping houses, but now I'm over here." And then when you're walking to go do this next assignment,
Yeah.
someone's like, "Oh, Justin, ain't you the real estate guy?" "I
I
was." Boom.
was.
And so you don't let people
Yeah.
keep you in the boat.
100%.
You don't, because you don't let. Man, I was talking to someone last night about Deion
That's so
Sanders
good. Oh, yeah. Let's
and
get into
that
this. This
whole
is interesting.
fiasco of everybody tripping, and I said, "You know what? I'm cool with it, because I understand that he understands the call." And here's my issue, is that we throw our nets on one side, and we think that we can only keep it there, and we think that it's noble
Right.
that I keep trying to catch fish over here. When somebody's saying, I said, he understands what his net is. His net
100%.
is to impact young men and women, no matter what race and color, and no matter what school they're at.
And wherever they're at.
That's
Yeah.
his, that's
100%.
his net. So, well, maybe his net was cast into Jackson State for 2 years. And now God is telling him to throw it on the other side. And now he'll go to a bigger school where he can catch more fish. He said, "I will make you fishers of men." And what we need to understand, which I think also deals with what we're talking about, is you need to understand what your net is.
Mm.
What is the net that God has given you to catch fish, to catch people? What is that net? The net will always be the net. It's where he tells you to cast it.
Yeah.
And so,
You
you
know
know,
what, man? That's a great point. I love this. I love that you're going down this path, because when we talk about casting people's nets, right? I think a lot of people, especially people that may be brought up in the church and they may understand this analogy. A lot of people that listen, they know nothing about what you mean by casting nets and things like that, right? And so, as a fisherman, right, the objective of casting a net, right, is you can either fish with a reel, right, and catch one at a time, or you can fish with a net and catch multiples, right? The thing about the net is it got to chill for a while, right? The net, it's gotta be in the water for quite some time. It's very probably unlikely for you to put the net in the water and pull it right back out and you got a bunch of fish in it. That's probably unlikely. It's more common for you to put bait on the end of a hook, throw that in with the reel and catch one at a time. And so here's the thing. I think that when it comes to fishing with nets versus fishing with the reel, and I'm curious, anybody that are fishermen are listening, they probably can correct me on this, but my assumption is that the net's got to be in the water a lot longer than the reel does. And if you're not careful, you can look at reel people, REEL, people that got fishing reels, and they're grabbing all these what you may look like fish out of the water. Maybe that could be a new job, a new career. Man, somebody just got married. Man, somebody just had a kid, and I want my kids. I want my marriage. I want my new job. I want my new business to flourish, XYZ. And you don't realize that you've got a net in the water. And some people's nets, right, are going to take a lot longer, but you got to realize that the thing you're going to be pulling out of the water is going to be much more substantial than the people that potentially are working hard. And you, or for, again, from even from what you see, right? Because our perspective is always one-sided because we only see what people reveal and they share with us. We don't always see the full story. And so I love that. I love that analogy that that you kind of connected there, because as people are really endeavoring in their journey to live the best version of themselves and be all that God has called them to be, whatever form that is, I think that you've got to, like, from what I'm taking from you, is there's a couple things that we got to learn to navigate. And one of the things is we got to learn to navigate the people putting us in prisons and people putting us in containers and crates and jars that used to be us that are maybe not us. Or I loved how you mentioned that often people's initial introduction of you is who they hold you to be in their minds. And so as you talk about that transition, right, as you talk about becoming the best version of you, one thing that I know, right, is that no one becomes the best version of themselves without triumph. You know, like when it comes to all that's on the inside of you, at least I haven't been able to connect and access all that's on the inside of me without making mistakes, without going through life, without going through challenge and having to recover, having to dust myself off. So for the people, right, this is about the pivot, right? And I want you to kind of talk about some of the pivots you've had to make, right? Or if you share to explain, or if you care to explain even one of the more challenging pivots or one of the hardest pivots that you've had to navigate when it comes to being you and what you would consider the best version of yourself.
Um, I think one of the hardest pivots I ever had to make was to pick kind of pivot off of music. With I would say COVID, but because God is who He is, I was pivoting before COVID, and so I got to the point where I brought my brother in at the church, and he was playing. I wasn't even playing in church anymore, so all of my friends were hitting me up like, "Yo, you don't play at church anymore?" No. And they're like, "Really?" And I'm like, "No, I'm doing I'm running the band and I'm running Ableton and kind of doing a lot of production stuff behind the scene." And I think God was already like giving me a glimpse, like something's getting ready to come down the pipe.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be you just not playing in church anymore. You're not going to be playing for a while.
Mm.
And
And
so
this
he
was
was kind of,
pre-COVID. You're saying this is before COVID, like right
yeah, before
during COVID.
COVID.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I think one of the hardest things for me was that was who I thought I was. I thought I was this musician and I was doing it full time. So that's how I was paying bills and things like that. And so once you start factoring in like I get paid to do this, it's even harder
Yeah.
to to pivot. But the crazy thing was that was happening. And as much as I was like, you know, I know God called me to like this whole leadership and pastorship kind of stuff, but I don't really advertise it. People, it didn't matter. People were coming up to me, calling me Pat. Dude, when we were shut down, I was making house calls, bro. I went to
Wow.
somebody's house whose kid, almost OD. I was going over people's houses praying for people that were going through bad divorces. I went to someone's house that just said they seen just crazy stuff like and And I'm sitting there like, God, if you if you don't be in this, I don't know what's gonna happen. And it was just like it was almost like I didn't even have a chance to sit and think about it. It was just what was happening. So
Yeah.
as it was happening, I had to own it. And that's what was the hard thing about the pivot was like that's why I say it's really mental. It's really what
Mm,
you think of it. And I had to like as much as I was like, nah, I don't want to do I don't want to do
yeah.
this. I
Yeah.
had to. It was what was required. It's what was required of me. And sometimes I think we think that the pivot should be easy or I should be able to pivot into things that I want to do. And sometimes
Wow.
it's not the answer.
So for
Sometimes it's
you, no, that's good. So you're saying for you, the pivot wasn't an intentional, deliberate decision. For you, it was like a survival thing. It was like, yo, the thing that I was doing is gone. It's no longer available. Like
yeah,
I can't. And here's the thing, right? That was also your livelihood. So it wasn't just you were a musician because you love to play instruments. It was this is also my livelihood. This is how I take care of myself and put food on the table and all that kind of stuff. So, like, where was your mindset through? I mean, we're talking about it on the other side right now, but where was your mindset in the midst of, whoa, I have no job, church is closed, the whole country is in a disarray. Where were you at mentally with all of this?
at first, at the beginning, I was kind of cool with it, just because I had been traveling a lot, and so I'm like, oh, cool, this is cool. Like I can chill at home, work from home, and but then it kept going, and the more it kept going, the more mentally it weighed on me because I started to feel like I was useless.
Mm,
Um, And that was the man side of me, like, I felt like I had no job and I'm trying, right? Like, I'm trying everything and nothing's happening, and I felt like people were looking at me like I was a bum, and I'm like, "Nah,
mm,
I've never been scared to work."
yeah.
You know,
Why do you
I
think people
work.
was looking at you like that? Like, what for
I
you?
I think that I don't know. I think that may have just been me. Maybe they weren't looking at me like that, but I felt like I wasn't contributing anything,
Mm,
you know, and I know a lot of people, and I think a lot of it was like at that time, people were getting heck of money for on unemployment and things like that, and they were just like, "We're never going back to work." And for me, I kind of felt like maybe I was being lumped into that. But here's the difference with doing music the way that I was doing it. There's no unemployment. You don't work for anybody. You're your own man,
right.
and so you're contracted. So I didn't benefit from any of that. If I'm honest, I have not received one stimulus check. Let me be very never. I never got one stimulus check. And so it was literally everything that I was trying to do on my own. And with the pivot, like for me, it was more of a mental pivot than anything. And God told me, He said, in this season, you're gonna learn um, you're gonna learn how to ask and you're gonna learn how to be humble. And I'm like, I'm not even an arrogant guy. What are you talking about? He's like, no, it's not that. You're used to making everything happen for yourself. So you don't ask anybody for anything. If you need something, you can go jump on the gig and
Yeah.
make some money, or you can call some friends. And so you're used to like, I'll go work, I'll go do it. And God said, the only way you're gonna know that I'm a good father is that you ask and let me
Mm,
provide. And man, that was that was the hardest thing of like for me, man, I probably was in a state of depression. I talked to you.
yeah.
Man, it was so man, it was tough because I'm like, God, do you want me to be homeless? Like
Yeah.
I'm trying, like I'm applying for jobs, churches, everything, like stuff I don't even want to do.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I had to make money, right? I had to provide. And God was like closing all of them doors. and
That's crazy. So
I
hold
didn't
on, let me pause you there because I think um you said a lot in the sense that I think when it comes to often how we view God, right? If you have the wrong expectation, because there's people that in that environment, they would have they would have been done with God, right? God who what God? How did you let me go through? How did you let me experience? How if there was a God, why was there COVID? Why did people die? There's people that go there, right? Especially when it comes to traumatic events, or even more so, traumatizing events for themselves, right? And you were kind of going through both. It was traumatic for everybody in the end, the internal trauma that you were experiencing because of the life that you had. You said, you were on the road, you were traveling like crazy. Like, so for you, it went from 100 to 0 real quick. It wasn't even like, like I think stuff is getting bad. It's like, no, it went, like you said, you gigging, you're on the road, you're moving around. So as you think through that version of you and where you were then, and getting the opportunity and the experience to see God in a new way, which I believe you did, how do you believe you were helped the most through that? Like, obviously you had doors that were shutting or doors that weren't opening at all. You had a huge door around your being a musician and the opportunities that come from that being closed. What do you say to the person then, right? Because we're a couple years out now, or years, about a year or so out now. But like, what would you have said now on the other end of that to that person that was in the midst of all the, I don't know where the next thing is coming from. Do you want me to be homeless? I'm down to my last whatever. What do you say to that person now?
Now, I would say, I would probably say now, like, you're just in the middle of the story. This isn't the conclusion.
Mm,
And no matter what God allows, He's still God and He's still faithful. It's not unto death. That's what I would say to the Jason then. Like, I know it looks dark, but daylight's coming. Just keep on
mm,
just keep on
man, that's blessing me. That's blessing me. That's but because in like because to me, what you learn, right, is that there's really almost nothing that you said it's not unto death, right? And I think that it can feel like that though, right? Going without can feel like this is over, this is the end, right? I'm not. I don't know how I come back from this. How do I come back from here? And I love where your mindset was, because like you were going through it, so it's not to say that you did it gracefully and it was just but you had a foundation that you could rest on and go back to, that would sustain you and keep you through that time that you were experiencing. I believe a lot of people, that experience is a breeding ground for true success. And what I define success as is it's an internal success, right? Success for some people is it could be financially, right? And or it could be emotionally, it could be spiritually. I believe everybody has their own measure and barometer for what success is. But if we're honest, success really is almost like not gonna happen, right? Throughout, without truly going through some of the fire and some of those moments that a lot of us would desire to go around, but we got to go through.
Yep.
And man, what I've learned, right, in life is just the importance of, when you're one, I would say, identifying those moments, right? How do you identify the moments pre-hand, right? It's one thing to be in the midst of it and then looking back and like, oh, that was actually a storm that I was in. It's one thing to do it
Right.
on the, but can you label the thing now, right? Because I think one of the challenges that we have is it's hard for us to go through it when we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
If some, like, my power went out in my house a couple weeks ago, and um, it was just random. It was like 4 o'clock. It was some rain outside, but it wasn't significant. It wasn't a storm. There wasn't no tornado. It wasn't nothing crazy. And I'm working, and literally everything shuts down. I'm like, what the heck is happening? And so in the midst of that, I'm like, what the heck? I'm like checking my, our internet everything, right? Internet go down, my life is over, right? Like, Wi-Fi is done. If the Wi-Fi
Right.
is done, I mean the security system's done. I can't do nothing. Phone's done. I don't got good reception in the house, so I rely on Wi-Fi to have good, right? So I'm like, yo, I'm done, right? Life is done, as we know it. But here's what gave me comfort. What gave me comfort was me finding out that somebody hit a pole and it affected the entire neighborhood's power. I'm like, oh, okay, this sucks.
I know
It
what
doesn't.
it
It's not to say that it don't suck. It still sucks. It's super inconvenient. I had to kind of end my day early, and what I was
right,
then able to do is where I was like, hey, babe, all right, cool, let's go get something to eat. Right, power clearly ain't working here. It's almost time for dinner. Let's just go out and go get something to eat. And so I think often what we don't allow ourselves to do is label the thing we're in the midst of it. And so then for me, labeling it, saying, hey, this is a power outage and you just gotta wait it out, was like, oh, okay, like I just gotta go through it. Like it'll be all right. And so I think
right,
what maturity says is, hey, storms don't last long. The
right,
maturity says this is not unto death. And you called that, right? You're like, yo, this is not unto death. And I think if we can be more intentional about labeling the thing and knowing that there's only a matter of time, that you can only stay in it for so long. There's only, God is only going to bring that thing for so long. And so long could be 12 years. I don't know what your so long is, right?
right,
But they have the ability to label something and then let that label carry you through. Because now I've got the mentality like, okay, cool, I'm just in a power outage. Okay, cool, I'm just in a lull right now. Hey, you know what? This is just going to be a season where I have to be more intentional about my finances or whatever that is. So I love that
right.
you went there, and that was something that you kind of used to define that moment for you.
Yeah. And let me say this, when you're talking about labeling, what I understood it was, although I understood it wasn't unto death, there was a death that had to happen. And here's the
Jeez.
crazy thing. When I was going through it, God shared this with me. When, as it relates to Easter, right? We celebrate the resurrection, and that is wonderful. We should absolutely celebrate but everything is about the resurrection. But God said to me, there can never be a resurrection if there's never a death. And nobody wants to die, but everybody wants to be resurrected. But you can't resurrect nothing that ain't dead. And so what had to happen was there were some things that I had to die to. There were some things that had to die in me, some ideologies there was a death that had to happen. I had to die to thinking that God was God, but he was God partially because I was me.
Ooh, hold on,
And I had
rewind that back. Rewind that back. You're just not gonna skate past that. We just not going.
I had to die to the ideal of believing that God was God, but he was partially God because of who I was.
Mm,
In other words, I trusted him with things that I knew that I could handle. So was it that he was really God in my life or that I was playing God as well? I was helping him.
wow.
I was his Santa's helper.
Sidekick. Yeah.
And I had to die to the ideal of thinking that I trusted him, but I really didn't trust him.
Talk about that. Like, what do you mean you didn't trust him?
Like I didn't trust him beyond what I could handle. So when you talk about faith, a lot of people say they have faith for things like, oh, I trusted God and I believed God that I was going to get this new car and I got it. Like, did you really trust God that you were going to get that? Or you knew you were getting a Christmas bonus that enabled you to put that down payment on the car?
Yeah. Like,
Like,
was it really faith?
right. That's not, you don't need faith for things that you can do. I don't need to have faith to tie my shoes. I know how to tie my shoes.
Yeah.
What I need faith is when I get the call saying that my brother has cancer and they don't know. And he goes to get tested to see what stage he's at. And the doctors are bewildered because there's absolutely no cancer in his
Mm.
body. And they know what they saw. I can't do that.
Do you think
I
we
can't
confuse
fix that.
faith? Do you think we confuse faith and confidence?
Yeah.
Like, do you think, yo, like what they're really saying is I was low in confidence in this area and I
Yeah.
had more confidence to do this thing versus faith, right? Because in
Yeah.
that example, I can have, man, I just don't have confidence that I'll be able to save enough money to get a car. It's really my confidence. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily a faith issue. Like you got enough money. Like the money is flowing through for you to easily be able to afford that car. You can easily save the amount of money necessary for that. But your confidence really in your ability, not God's, but in your ability to do the the thing that God is saying, hey, no, you could totally do that. I think
Right.
sometimes we give that kind of scenario and we put faith on it.
Yeah.
And here's the piece, man, because I think it go both ways, right? Like calling something faith robs you of personal development. Like
Mm.
there is a God that says, hey, no. Like I don't want you to always lean on faith. There is a part of you, right? We go from faith to faith, glory to glory, right? And so what was faith on one season now should be development on that next season. What you used to have faith for now should be the floor. That's what you got confidence for now. Like you've developed up to that point. And so the faith is that next step, that next level. And so it's like, how do we get beyond just being always throwing faith on a thing? Because I think when we always throw faith on the thing, again, we rob ourselves from the personal development necessary to repeatedly have that thing. Like, do we have to always go back to the well? Is God always one rescuing us? Is he always the one that's saving us? Or have you finally taken the personal accountability to say, you know what? My faith is that my development is going to meet the level of sacrifice and expectation that I have on God. Like my faith is not just on God being God, but my faith is on I've got the ability to personally develop myself in the standard in which I'm requesting and calling God to place on my life.
Yeah.
It's
I think
huge.
here's the I think here's the problem with that application of faith that you were saying. It then becomes result driven. So not only do we rob ourselves, but we rob others because we think that faith is only relocated when, oh, I had faith because the outcome that I wanted happened. Here's the thing: Jesus's issue wasn't with the resurrection, wasn't whether or not he was going to be resurrected. His issue was with whether or not, for a moment, he wanted to die.
Mm,
And so faith isn't only for, I want these results, but sometimes your faith says that I understand it's not gonna go well.
yeah.
But I have enough faith to trust that even in this season where it feels like I'm not winning, that God is still in control of it. Everybody I pray for is not, family members that were on death's bed that we wanted to God to heal them.
100%.
And he didn't. It isn't because I didn't have enough faith. It's because how I viewed healing was off. He did heal them. They'll never be sick again in the kingdom. There is no sickness in heaven. They'll never have to go to another doctor appointment. They'll never have to feel pain again. And many times we want things on earth. We want them to happen here in the tangible. And God is saying, like, that's not. So your faith has to be bigger than what you can see. Because if you can see it, then now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things
Not
not
yet
seen.
seen. Yeah.
And it's what I'm doing that you don't see that I need you to have faith in. When it's dark, when you can't see, there's no light, you don't even know how deep the tunnel is. You don't know where the exit's at. You don't know how long you got to walk in the dark. I need you to trust that as you're walking in the dark, what you can't see, I see.
Wow. Wow.
And so
Wow.
when you have no eyes, when your eyes are covered, sometimes I wish we were like the guy that it's literally said he spit in mud. It wasn't that he restored his sight, he created his eyes. And sometimes we need God to recreate our eyes so that what we see, what we don't see, is what we will see. And that's where our faith, it is not result driven. It is when we don't see that
Wow.
I can put on my spiritual eyes and trust that when I can't see it, when I can't feel it, when I don't know how deep the water is,
Yeah.
that I have
Yeah.
enough faith to step out on the boat. 11 of them stayed on the boat. Will you be the
100%.
11 or will you be the one?
Yeah.
He never sunk. We thought he sunk, but Jesus got him before he ever sank. It said he started
He
to
started.
sink, but he did not.
Mm.
It took faith to get out there and sink. And I think sometimes we think it's faith is when we're winning. Sometimes it takes faith to lose.
Wow. Oh, y'all hear the preacher. Y'all didn't heard from Pastor Martin. Bishop Bishop Martin has blessed us. Yo, that was so powerful, man. I love that perspective. Because again, for me personally, I just believe that everything, Bible declares that everything is working together for our good. And if we don't understand the together piece, to me, that's the biggest word in that verse is everything, really the everything in together. But the together piece in that, it's saying one is not happening without the other. And that all of the experiences that you're going through and all the things you're facing, all the things you're processing through right now, all the hell, all the success, all the ups and downs, all the things, it's all working together for you. And the faith to lose, right? Who do you, and it's not necessarily having faith that you're going to lose, but it's having faith that says, despite the outcome, the fact that I've got faith is the win.
Right.
The win isn't, like you said, it's that quote that says, work like everything depends on me and pray like everything depends on God. Um, I go back and forth with that one because there's an aspect um of like the working like everything depends on me that I think creates the person that sometimes creates is not
Mhm.
not the best version and not the best person that will actually be able to pray like it all depends on God, because it's not like it actually does all depend on God.
Right.
So, but for man, this was so good. This was so powerful. I would say, man, to leave our audience with something, I really want you to kind of give them kind of just a word of encouragement for anybody. And most people that are listening to this podcast, Jasson, are um, they're personally developing themselves. They're in the midst of pivots, right? Whatever those are. They might be getting a new job. They might be thinking through, do I move to a different state? Do I marry this person or not? They may be in the midst of decisions, and they're constantly developing themselves, and they are aggressive at going after what they know they deserve, and connected to the purpose that's on the inside of them. So being somebody that has gone through pivots yourself and gone through the ups and the downs and have gone through the fire and gone through not knowing how things will work out, but they eventually did on the other side, how would you encourage the person that right now is looking at a storm? They might be looking at a mountain. They might be looking at a Goliath, and they're not sure that they're going to get out on the other end. They're not sure that they even have the makeup inside of them to truly get out. What do you say to that person?
I would say to that person, you would never know what's inside of you without the storm, without the giant. And there was one thing a pastor said to me that I will never forget. He said, "There are always giants in the promised land." Let that sink in. There's always giants in the promised land. So even when you make it, when Joshua and Caleb went to see the promised land, half of them came back and said, "There's giants we'll never overcome." But why are giants in the promised land? Because it teaches us how to war. Everybody wants the smooth, everybody wants it easy, but you'll never know what you're made of until pressure pulls it out of you. And then um, purpose, destiny is built in obscurity. And I know we don't want, a lot of us are scared of the dark and we don't
100%.
want to be in. But a tree grows, it grows underground first. It sets root first before we ever see it spring above ground. There's a growth happening below ground that totally impacts what does above ground. Never be scared of the dark.
Wow. Well, folks, there you have it. My man, Jasson Martin. Man, brother, thank you for joining us today on this episode of the Pivot Mindset Podcast. Man, for people that are listening, drop your information. Let people know where they could find you, where they can hear more of this juice from. I think you got a podcast too, man. So drop your podcast. I would love for people to go check out your podcast and what all you're doing over there.
Yeah, so I do have a podcast. It's called and it's on everything, Spotify, Apple, and it's called the Jam Sessions. And so, I like to say that we're just having a conversation. So, you can check me out there. I'm also on YouTube as Jam Sessions as well on YouTube. So you can check out all of those platforms and kind of see some things and hear some things and, reach back out to me if you have any questions. Or I really appreciate you, Justin, for having me on.
Of course.
um, I always learn a lot from you. I listen to your podcast and we've had conversations and I just want to appreciate what you're doing because if no one stops to tell you, like, man, you're making an impact. You're not just being influential, you're making an
Mhm.
impact, and I appreciate it.
Brother. Man, I appreciate you. Much love to you. So, y'all, that's it. That's this episode. So, y'all remember here that life is all about the pivots, and those who decide to make the pivots decide to become successful. Peace.